Good morning, students. Today we will do the chapter of how do organism reproduce. So, before beginning the chapter, we should know the definition of reproduction. Reproduction is a process by which an organism gives birth to new organism similar to its kind. So, reproduction is a process by which organism give birth to new organism similar to its kind. There are two types of reproduction. Reproduction is of two types: sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. In sexual reproduction, two parents are involved, whereas in asexual reproduction, only one parent is involved. In sexual reproduction, there is formation of gametes. Whereas in asexual reproduction, no formation of gamete take place. So, if someone asks which is the better type of reproduction from sexual and asexual, then the answer would be sexual reproduction is better reproduction as compared to asexual, because in sexual reproduction there is variation which gives survival advantage to the organism. So, sexual reproduction is better because in the sexual reproduction there is creation of variation, and due to this variation there is survival advantage to the organism. Now let us look at different types of asexual reproduction. The first type of asexual reproduction is binary fission. In binary fission, an organism gives rise to two new organisms. Example of this is amoeba and paramecium. So, an organism gives rise to two new organisms. Let us understand this with the help of diagram. If this is amoeba, then it will develop a depression. The nucleus will replicate and divide into two, and one nucleus will go in each of the organism, and now these two organisms will separate from each other and they will develop into a new amoeba. So this is binary fission. An organism has divided into two new organisms, and these two organisms will have equal shape and size. Example is amoeba and paramecium. Next comes second type of asexual reproduction, that is multiple fission. In multiple fission, an organism divides into many new organisms. In binary, it develops into only two new organisms. Here it develops into many new organisms. So let us look. Example of this is Plasmodium, which is a malarial parasite. So if this is a plasmodium and this is the nucleus of the plasmodium, then the nucleus, it will replicate into many nuclei. So this is the nucleus and it has replicated into many nuclei. And now there would be formation of cell wall around these nuclei. Around these nuclei, cell wall formation will occur. These are the cell wall formation. And now this nucleus, this cell, it will break, which is known as a lysis of cell. It will break lysis of cell, and these all new organisms would be released from it. So these are the new plasmodium. So in plasmodium, nucleus first replicates into many nuclei, then there is cell wall formation around the nuclei, and these nuclei becomes plasmodium. Then the cell, it undergoes lysis and a new organism, new plasmodium, is released in the environment. Now let us look at third type of asexual reproduction, that is fragmentation. In fragmentation, an adult organism on maturation, breaks into smaller fragments, and each fragment develops into new organism. Example of this is Spirogyra. So an adult organism, it will break into fragments and each fragment will develop into a new organism. Let us understand this with the help of example. Imagine this is a cell of Spirogyra. So this is Spirogyra. Spirogyra has ribbon-shaped chloroplasts. Now what will happen? The Spirogyra, it will break into two parts, and each part will develop into a new Spirogyra. So this is the example of fragmentation. Now let us look at fourth type of asexual reproduction, that is budding. In budding, an organism develops an outgrowth called bud, and then this bud separates from parent organism to form new organism. Example of this is yeast. Let us explain this with the help of diagram. If this is yeast and this is the nucleus of the yeast, what will happen? There would be formation of an outgrowth called bud. The nucleus will start dividing. This is the dividing nucleus. This is the bud. And now this bud will separate the nucleus. First of all, the nucleus would separate. This is the nucleus of this cell. This is now this bud will separate and this will form the new yeast. This is seen in yeast and hydra also. Now let us look at fifth type of asexual reproduction, that is regeneration. In regeneration, an organism is cut in small pieces. Organism is cut into small pieces and each piece develops into new organism. Example is planaria. Let us understand this with the help of example. This is the planaria. Now it would be cut into three pieces. This is the upper part, this is the middle part, and this is the lower part. And now each part will develop into a new planaria. So each part has developed into a new planaria. This is regeneration. Now let us look at sixth type of asexual reproduction, that is spore formation. Spore formation. In spore formation, the spores are formed on a structure inside a structure known as sporangium. So spores are formed inside the structure known as sporangium. This is the sporangium and these are the black colored spores which are formed here. These are the spores. Now this sporangium, it is situated, it lies over a stalk which is known as sporangiophore. So spore formation take place inside the sporangium, and sporangium lies on the structure known as sporangiophore. Sporangiophore is attached to the substratum with the help of rhizoids. So this is spore formation. A single sporangium can have many spores. An example of spore formation is fungus, fern, and moss. Now let us look at seventh type of asexual reproduction, that is vegetative propagation. Vegetative propagation. Now in vegetative propagation, new plant develops from the vegetative part of the plant. Example, root, stem, and leaves. So new plant will develop from the vegetative plants of the plant, like root, stem, and leaves. And these root, stem, and leaves which help in production of new plant are known as vegetative propagules. The first example of this is leaf of bryophyllum. If this is the leaf of bryophyllum, then inside these notches of bryophyllum leaves, there is presence of adventitious bud. This adventitious bud now separates from the bryophyllum and develop into a new bryophyllum plant. So this is bryophyllum vegetative reproduction. So in bryophyllum, the notches of the leaf contain adventitious bud, and these adventitious buds separate from the bryophyllum to form new bryophyllum plant. Now let us look at types of vegetative propagation. The first type of vegetative propagation is cutting. In cutting, what we do, imagine this is a plant. This is a plant, stem of a plant. We cut this stem like this. This is the oblique cut which we have made, oblique cut. Now this plant would separate like this because we have made a cut. Now this part which has separated from the plant is known as cutting. And now this cutting is placed in the soil and it will develop into a new plant. So inside a cutting, we make an oblique cut on the stem of the plant. The separated part from the plant is known as cutting. This cutting is placed into the soil and it develops into a new plant. Now the second type of vegetative propagation is grafting. In grafting, we combine stem of two best quality plants. One stem is rooted, called stalk, and other which is not rooted is called scion. Let us understand this with the help of diagram. So we will take two stems. One stem would be rooted. This is a rooted stem, which is known as stalk. And other stem would not be rooted, which is known as scion. Now we will combine the stalk and scion with the help of a thread. And now this whole stem will develop into a new plant. Let us look at third type of vegetative propagation, that is layering. Inside layering, imagine if this is a plant and these are its branches. These are the branches of the plant. What will we do? We will take a branch and we will put it into the soil like this. Now after some time there would be growth of adventitious roots from this branch which we have rooted inside the soil, and now there would also be growth of shoot from this. So means new plant has developed. Now when there is also formation of shoot from this, we will cut this branch from here and this will grow into a new plant. This is the cut. Now the fourth and the last type of vegetative propagation is tissue culture. In tissue culture, we take a test tube. Inside the test tube, we put a nutrient medium and we take any part of the plant and put it inside the nutrient medium, that is known as explant. Explant is any part of the plant. After some time, this explant will grow into mass of undifferentiated cell, which would be called callus. Callus is mass of undifferentiated cell. After some time, this callus now will develop into a small plantlet. It will develop into a plantlet. This plantlet would be rooted inside the soil and it will develop into a new plant. So this is tissue culture. Now let us look at advantages of vegetative propagation. First advantage of vegetative propagation is that since it is a type of asexual reproduction, there is no variation and identical plants are produced. So identical plants are produced. The second advantage of vegetative propagation is that it is quick method of growing plant. The third advantage of vegetative propagation is that it is the only method to grow seedless plants, seedless fruits or plants. For example, banana. So in banana, which are seedless plants, vegetative propagation is only method to grow seedless plants. What are the disadvantages of vegetative propagation? Disadvantage is that there is, of course, because it is asexual, there is no creation of variation. And second, the vegetative propagules from which these plants grow, like roots, stem and leaves, they cannot. Vegetative propagules like roots, stem and leaves from which these plants grow cannot be kept for a long time.